Yo, how's it going, folks? Welcome to episode 151. I hope you're keeping well. I hope you're enjoying. Can we call this summer? I know I'm not going to complain at the start of this podcast much, but it is my birthday and I was promised sunshine. It is fucking miserable out there, and I currently don't have a car, so I'm kind of trapped in the house, which is good because I've got a good guest today to have a conversation with to brighten my day up. So yeah, I'm not going to waffle about the weather. I'm annoyed by it, but it did produce a really good Formula One race at Silverstone this weekend, so yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Swings and roundabouts, folks. Swings and roundabouts. All right, I'm not going to keep you too much. We've got some news that I did want to discuss. Luckily, we do have a relevant guest today, so we will be able to discuss some of those things. Anything else that I did want to discuss this week? We're going to move into next week's guest because I keep mixing up my days. Basically, I got a new kitten last week, guys, and I'm not keeping track of my days. I'm being woken up at 5 in the morning by this tiniest little thing, and he squeals like a banshee. It is unbelievable. And Neo, as you may know, my senior cat, very lovely, very placid little boy. He's a little bit annoyed, so I'm micromanaging cats at the minute more than I am doing any of my own goddamn work. But yeah, enough about the problems of my pitiful little life here, folks. Let's jump straight into introducing today's guest, who is an American award-winning professional cartoonist whose work has appeared in the New York Times, Playboy, and New York Magazine. His current syndicated non-fiction comic strip, Legalization Nation, is in the FS Gate, explores the complexities of the emerging US lawful cannabis industry from a ground-level perspective. I highly recommend you check out his graphics as well that you can get in bite-sized chunks through his Instagram, which I'll link below. But without further ado, let's introduce Brian Box Brown. How are you doing, Brian?
Hey, good, good. That was a nice introduction. Thank you.
Oh, appreciate. Yeah, I usually get quite a few comments that I'm quite often over caffeinated at the start of these things. Obviously recording with an American guest today means I've had plenty of opportunity to drink coffee today, but because of the bloody cat, I actually haven't had opportunity to drink coffees. I keep making them and forgetting about them because I'm having to figure out what he's broken, what he's doing. I have a multitude of houseplants that have all ended up on the floor this week. I'm just so glad he can't get to my other garden, because he would create carnage and chaos in there, I imagine. But yeah, let's jump in for people that kind of don't know. Actually, I did say in the preamble I was going to ask you my cliched question about how you got involved in cannabis, but I think it's more important to ask how you sort of got into becoming a cartoonist. You've
Yeah,
obviously been doing it for quite a while now. Is this something that you like? Did you draw as a child and it was something that naturally evolved, or is it something you sort of came to later?
yeah. I mean, kind of. I drew a lot as a child, and I kind of got out of it when I entered puberty, um, because it just got kind of crazy, and I kind of like associated drawing with like childhood, I guess, and
Hmm.
trying to like be an adult or something. I don't know. Anyhow, I got back into drawing later on in life, in like in college or after college. And then I started making comics. I got into making, weird comics or like alternative comics, like Daniel Close and Charles Burns, James Kachalka, Chris Ware, and that those types of uh, comic artists, right?
Hmm.
And did this biography about Andre the Giant that ended up being a New York Times bestseller. It's like translated in a bunch of languages and stuff. And I did a series of uh, nonfiction comics about all different subjects. I did one about cannabis, about like the history of American cannabis, whatever, or the history of cannabis in America.
Hmm.
And then I started getting really into like present day like issues with cannabis when I was working on my book about the history
Hmm.
because they had in that time they legalized in my where I live, which is in Philadelphia. So, but they just legalized medical cannabis, but um, but they had stores and stuff, and so I was looking forward to it because I had been to the West Coast a bunch of times, Colorado and all that, and been to dispensaries and stuff, and so I was like really looking forward to having like a dispensary. It was like right down there's one right down the street from me, so I was like stoked, but then like I started going to the dispensary and I was like, this is not like what I had. This is not like my experience in the West Coast for one thing, but it's also like not what I had in mind with legalization, like at all.
Hmm.
Where it's like this weird kind of like, almost like a CVS or like this very homogenized pharmacy type experience, like with a culture stripped from it, and the prices were
Mm.
high and the products were limited, and it just like wasn't cool at all. And so, hold on, sorry. Um, and so, I started digging into that, and then I ended up like getting like completely obsessed with like why cannabis legalization in America was like so fucked up.
Hmm.
But but I was like already yelling about it on Twitter and shit. No one really listens or whatever. But then I was like, well, I know how to make comics. Like that's what I do. So I started making this comic strip, Legalization Nation, about all this stuff, and people started actually like reading it. They would read the comic more than they would just like listen to me, chatter.
Mm.
And so, yeah, that's how I got into it. I've been doing it for like 3 years now.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, I had a look at your back catalogue of work, and it is interesting that you've just. It does seem that you have the talent and the passion, like you say, you rediscovered it, and then you just kind of went, "What am I interested in?" And you kind
Yeah,
of went, "Oh, well, as you say, you started with Andre the Giant. I think I saw you did one of was it the when it was still the WWF as well. I saw obviously the Tetris one on gaming and games that people play, and it's just
yeah,
interesting that you're through the medium you are able to reach more people. It kind of it doesn't it's like the opposite of sanitization in a way. You know how when you hear something from one person you're like, well, that's just one person, but when you see artwork, which is frankly what the comics are in of themselves, it speaks volumes. It's that old expression of like a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I think your work encapsulates that. There's a lot to it, and it does create an incredible amount of discourse on social media, as you say. I imagine a lot more than you just as another, as it were, random person in the world just going, oh, I think this. It really
sure. Oh
gives
yeah, yeah,
like body to it, you know?
yeah. Like, usually like the comments under the strip like kind of like get out of control at some point where I don't even I stop kind of like reading them because there's so many, and it's just like there'll be two people fighting about something for like 2 weeks. I'm just getting all these notifications or whatever. Um, it's amazing to me like how cannabis people can be so in such agreement about like cannabis being like a good thing or whatever and legalization, and still argue so much about like all the shit that's going on and like how it's happening.
Mm. I mean, I could put my hand up and say I'm one of those argumentative
Oh
people.
yeah, definitely.
Not necessarily because I choose to be, but I think that the answer to your question is all in language. And I think that's
Yeah,
one of the things that, well, as I said to you when I reached out to you previously, that it's the language that I think I really appreciate, and what you're saying here. You're drawing attention to the fallibility of people with the Dunning-Kruger effect to go, I know that word, therefore I know all about that. And they
yeah,
speak on a position that they don't necessarily know. And then, especially in the US, now you guys have, legal bribe, sorry, not legal bribery, lobbyists
uh,
that have been working for quite an amount of time now to manipulate and massage that language. So when we hear legalization, we go, oh, jobs for the boys, freedom, we can grow as much as we want, set up shops, and it's the end of the war. And so we hear that word, and I've spent the past several years um, writing in Weed World magazine calling it neo-legalization because it's this new
yeah,
term, or like capital L legalization. So it's a proper noun. So it means
yeah, yeah,
separate from what legalization small l means. And
right.
I end up arguing until I'm blue in the face with some people that just can't quite grasp these concepts. And so
Yeah,
I can understand entirely how people end up doing that, but I try a lot to have the humility of going, I might be wrong here. But then if people don't have that humility, as you say, those conversations or their arguments can go on for weeks. But I will say that is very good for your engagement on social media.
no, but it's true because there's so much stigma surrounding it that like even people that are pro cannabis still have like baked in
Mhm.
stigma about things where they've heard it so much that like cannabis is dangerous, whatever. And then so you start talking about, how places need to have security and security cameras and stuff like this, and armed guards at the door and all these things.
Hmm.
And it's like, dude, the thing in there is not really, it's not dangerous at all. It's a plant. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
these things that maybe like, yes, there's robberies and things like that could happen. But like a lot of times people are very like, okay with there being armed guards at the door because they're like, oh no, it's dangerous. Even though I like it and I know that it's not dangerous. But like
Hmm.
there's this baked in kind of like stigma surrounding
Mm. Yeah, it's weird that gone from, as I think I wrote one time in an article, the days of like Peter Tosh and like Bob Marley saying like legalize it and meaning like end the war.
it.
That
Yeah.
now that legalize it has come to mean, oh, us, the same people that have vilified and demonized you, we want to create an exploitative system of profiteering. Because as you say, that I think you
Yeah.
actually pointed out in one of your very recent shorts. What do you call them? What would you call them?
Comic strips.
Comic strips, that's the word I
Yeah.
was looking for, sorry, strips on Instagram, was talking about where there's obfuscation is often corruption. It's not necessarily ignorance, that where there
Yeah.
is this inflated policies and legislative actions that are put in place. Dave runs a CCTV company, so we're just writing that everyone's got to buy the CCTV from Dave. Oh, and
Yep.
John owns all the trucks, so John's got to transport them. And Mike, he set up this security firm, so Mike's got to have his security. So as you say, it's
Right. And it's like that they don't, that's always obfuscated by the fact that, they'll be like, oh, well, we need this guy to do all the trucks because it's so dangerous that we have to make sure that there are controls in place
Mm,
for transportation, like whatever, like all these things. And it ends up being like cannabis is like the most overregulated
oh, it is.
product. I mean, and it's you can look at how much it's harming the market when you compare it to the hemp market in the US, which has
Yeah.
like become like a completely legal like alternative to like cannabis, but even though it is cannabis, it's really weird.
It's like a trick of spelling, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a,
it's like a loopholes and changing the way in which you're making the product, maybe all those different things, but the the regulations just aren't there.
Mhm.
And what you're seeing is way more product being put into the market, and it's able to go across state lines, and you know um, there's tons of competition in that market, and it's convenient. You can buy it at like grocery stores and gas
Mhm.
stations and dispensaries, which can kind of like open up anywhere and don't have to deal with local regulations either. And what the end result of that is that the product is like a lot cheaper, and even though it's basically the same product. And so it's really like a mockery kind of showing that all of these unnecessary laws and not laws but regulations surrounding cannabis and how dangerous it is. And here we have a parallel running market it has all of the same risks exactly, and is one. I mean, I'm not saying all that stuff is perfectly safe to consume because there is stuff that gets recalled and stuff, but generally speaking, there hasn't been like deaths or anything like that yet. Um,
It's,
two,
I was gonna say,
yeah.
just to clarify that, I think the was it in a Trulieve facility?
Oh yes,
That I was gonna
that
say,
was in the legal. That was
yeah,
yes, that's
yeah. I was
that was
just
in the legal market for sure. And that was like a yeah, that's true. But so it's inherently the same risks, right? As the whatever
mm,
legal market, but without all the regulatory stranglehold on it.
it's
Um, and it's happening right there. And all the stuff that's happening there is what people really want to happen with weed, which is to be accessible cheap and easy to obtain. Even in the legal market, like all those legal operators, they actually want what hemp has, which is the ability to ship over state lines and source product from all over the country,
Mhm.
all of those things. And so it's happening. And it's like not like the end of the world. There's not like tons of
Mhm.
uh tons of outbreaks of dangerous shit happening everywhere. Because cannabis is inherently like a very safe thing when in its own form.
Mhm.
What happens? The danger actually comes from people adding stuff to cannabis or changing cannabis. The actual cannabis plant is like much safer than all of the stuff that's out there, like because even the vape crisis and things like that, it wasn't cannabis that was harming anybody. It was the chemicals they're using in the process of
Yeah,
making that.
it's a vitamin E isotate or something
Right,
like that,
right,
and a
exactly.
few other
And
things.
so
Yeah,
like
it's
all that stuff, the hemp market, all of that exists because of the what's going on, the
mm,
illegalities and the regulatory stranglehold that's going on in legal cannabis. And there's also a huge black market still that's going on. That's another alternative to the legal
mm.
market, where in many cases, that's where the best weed is in that market.
That's where
Uh,
most of the legacy, like the people who are doing it anyway, for
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
they're waiting or fighting for and hoping for the end of the war, the actual
Right.
cessation. Like you say, it should be. I mean, no offense to you guys, I've spent a bit of time in the States, and there are about 70% of your supermarkets are probably more dangerous than cannabis. Like as you say, it's
Oh, I think
interesting.
about that all the time
Yeah, it's
because like
interesting. Sorry, go
sorry, no, they have all these rules about cannabis packaging here. Not, it can't be geared towards children. And then
on.
I was at the supermarket with my kids the other day, and we're looking at the candy aisle or like the cereal aisle, and it's 100% geared towards kids, and it has totally harmful shit in it. Like sugar's like, there's no doubt that sugar is harmful.
Mhm.
Like that is just like a thing that's been studied and is known. Yet these products are 100% geared towards children in like the most insidious possible ways. I actually wrote a book called The He-Man Effect, which discusses like how advertisers advertise towards children. And so
Mhm.
like these things don't have the regulations behind it at all, and it's actually much more dangerous for children than cannabis.
Well,
Um,
it's the whole model of grab them early, have them for life, isn't it? Marlboro figured that out back in the day. It
yeah,
does make me think that that all of the industries that exist now have been um, smoothed and worked on the lathe of corporates, the capitalist system. So they've been working overtime, peddling away, smoothing it, perfecting it, so that when the first cereal industry first started, I imagine probably was quite well regulated and people are mindful of different things. And then over time, that money, greed, interest
yeah,
modifies that industry, and I think that's a glimpse into where cannabis will be in the future, whatever we choose to call it, if that same industry can accelerate it as it chooses. It's interesting. I've often had quite a conspiratorial thought about why the Hemp Act was pushed in the US and why there was this deliberate division. And part of me thinks it's they want their pie and eat it. As you say, they want ubiquity of cannabis products, an accessible thing, so the majority of the black market people would go into that, find a entrepreneurial spirit and endeavors and go through that place because it's so accessible, but keep the, as long as they say the hemp word, they go, oh, it's THCA,
right,
and they talk all the
yeah,
right
yeah,
words, and they go, yes sir, thank you, and pay that little bit of money, they're safe. But then the people who dare call it cannabis sativa L, who dare understand its heritage, its history, and the culture, they'll always be vilified and demonized. And it just feels like it's this transfer of cannabis culture, like you say, that it's the homogenizing of it, the corrupting and co-opting of it to fit the mainstream narrative. Whereas cannabis in like the 60s, 70s was very anti-capitalist. It was people going,
yeah.
yeah, fuck the man, burn it down, let's live in alternative communes, woo. And
I always say that though it's true. Like that. all these illegal markets and stuff is that the one market they'll never get is like the Grateful Dead parking lot people who
Mm.
like still exist. I say Grateful Dead, it's like so dated, like all those guys are like whatever dead now, but or I guess they still tour, but like all that parking lot
Mhm.
cannabis culture that like still exists, and like that's where the best weed is in some cases. Like how many strains of weed were like developed and traded on like Grateful Dead tour? Like tons of it. It's like incredibly relevant to the
Mhm.
overall cannabis scene, whatever. And like those people like will never buy weed at like a dispensary ever. Like there's just like it's
That's the
never.
man's weed. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's like never gonna happen. And like the thing that like is like obnoxious to me is that like all the stuff on the legal market was developed on the illegal market. Like think about like all right, cannabis oil and dabs, like that was all developed on the illegal market. Like fucking edibles developed in the illegal market. Like all of this stuff, every strain, all of that,
Mhm.
all the popular strains that end up becoming popular on the legal market all start on the illegal market. Like
It's
very
yeah.
rare is there like a strain developed in the legal market that becomes like huge, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, you know,
Well,
and
it's
all
sorry, go on.
so all that stuff is just like theft. It's there's nothing that they develop on their own that becomes like very popular.
Yeah, 100%. I think I saw a clip of who was supposed to be my guest the other week actually, but I completely fucked up my time zones. Poetry of Plants. He was
Oh
on a
yeah,
first smoke of the day, and he said about stolen valor. And he was
yeah,
talking about that if there is anything in that space and industry, it was fucking stolen from us. And I was just like,
yeah. No, it's
100%, because like I said, I mean, my fighting vision is what I was hoping would sort of start to form in the US with this whole campaign to deschedule. Although it does look like Biden's accelerating. I think we're in that 60-day consultation window, or that window is supposed to open currently.
yeah,
The descheduling conversation would happen. So literally, it would be like farmers markets. So like over here, obviously, you can grow potatoes, onions, whatever in your back garden. You can then grow at scale, get commercial farming licenses, etc., get them graded, sold at markets. But you can also just have a big bit of land, grow some veg, and go to a car boot sale and just sell your veg. You can set up a stall on the side of the road and just sell your
yeah,
stuff. Like that's
yeah,
the vision. That is, it's not either or. There's all parts of this. Like you said, there needs to be the corporate side of it in a way to use tax and create it to be an accepted commodity within our larger system. But there has to be the liberty and freedom of the individuals. It's analogous to me of like gay liberation rights, is that it feels a lot like the system is kind of going, okay, all right, all the people that were gay before this day, yeah, fuck you. All you new gays, you're cool. Do you know what I mean? And but then there's
yeah,
still these
yeah,
regulations are going, yeah, but you can only hold hands 3 times a day.
for
You
sure.
can't go over there and be gay. You can go over there, be there and gay. Do you know? And all these just are, but it's like, no, you were wrong to ever vilify us. You don't
Right.
now get to tell us what our lives look like.
Yes, yes, 100%. That is what it's like with cannabis too. It's like I always say that it's like they're this is not just like a means to a corporate ends. You're righting a 100-year long wrong. You know what I mean? Like this has been wrong from the start. It's been wrong from the beginning. Like I say that about the CSA, like the CSA too.
Controlled Substances
But
Act for my
yeah, like
non-American listeners.
yeah, they're always like, we can reschedule it, and blah blah blah. I'm like, no, actually, the entire Controlled Substances Act was built upon racism, admittedly by the Nixon administration. It's been like the
Mm.
reason so many, it's accelerated like the prison situation in the United States. All of it, it's all been bad. And like they're talking about just moving cannabis from one spot to another spot on it. And I'm like, really, this is like a wound that needs to be completely fixed from the top, from the bottom up.
Mm.
Um, so like, when they talk about rescheduling, I'm like, no, well, first of all, we'll accept descheduling, but really you need to dismantle this whole system because it's just like not prop has never been set up properly and based on science ever. It's
Mhm.
always been based on fucking fucked up racism and pharmaceutical, manipulation and all that type of stuff.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I've done some deep diving over the wire over my time in this space, and one of the things that I have come to the conclusion of believing is that cannabis started to become vilified as a consequence of the creation of the modern pharmaceutical industry. It's in the mid 1800s when they created the hypodermic needle and they started to standardize drugs in nice little clean white powders, measurable outcomes, measurable dosages. Um, and cannabis wouldn't fit into that formula because of our endocannabinoid systems, because of a multitude of other different factors. We cannot get the same effect guaranteed in two people taking the same product at the same dose. That
Yeah,
she just won't fit into those triple blind placebo-controlled trials, no matter how hard they try. That's why they're making these cannabis drug-derived products where they're adding them to other compounds, which will give consistency and continuity of effect, even if it's reduced efficacy of the cannabis product. But basically, that accelerated through. And back in the days of cannabis just being, you go down to local doctor, and you go to the pharmacist, like saying, just get some cannabis oil or cannabis extract or tincture or whatever. You could just go down to a farmer or a place around and get access to it. The cannabis got pushed to the side because of all of these other novel drugs. And then I think during the First and Second World War, when frankly the pharmaceutical industry and chemical warfare became a little bit too close of industries, and a lot of things happened that then meant that they got so much more understanding. Obviously, great atrocities on all sides across the fucking world of what fucking happened during the wars. But it did lead to some innovations in their spaces, and I think since they've accelerated off, and we've seen that we've now got like carfentanil and fentanyl and things like this. These are super powerful drugs. They've now got nitazines and stuff like this. There's various synthetic products that were initially started in the laboratories of these pharmaceutical companies. Like the first spice, synthetic cannabinoid, was created by Pfizer. That was
yeah,
one of their first products, and they ended up shelving it because they just couldn't control it. They couldn't deal with the anomalous psychoactive side effects. And obviously now
yeah,
in the UK, we have a big problem in our prisons with spice because we're testing for cannabis, and cannabis smells. But
right.
these little spice bits where you can break open a vape pen and hack a battery and put it in there, and they're getting like it's something that's 250 times stronger,
It's
easy,
insane
and
to me,
it's
like
just blowing the heads off. But we're not
all
allowed
the
to have
stuff
weed.
it is, as like all of that spice and even all like the hemp market and some of the synthetic cannabinoids like THCO and THCP and all that stuff exists as like an end around to go around this federal law that is
Mm.
actually like protecting us from the safest version of all of these things. And so like
Yeah.
the legal stuff ends up it ends up being legal and as an alternative to real cannabis, but it's actually like dangerous and like not good and not the desired thing that you want. But also like cannabis isn't dangerous, like it's the safe thing. That's the safe alternative, the illegal, federally illegal thing, and then there's all these synthetics that are actually like dangerous, somewhat unpredictable, etc. Trying to mimic what cannabis already does and like not
Mm.
quite doing it and all that type of thing. Um, it's so obnoxious, and it is like semantics at this point. Like in the
Mm.
state of New Jersey, there's literally like two separate like legal definitions of there's hemp and there's cannabis, or there's marijuana and cannabis. They have like two separate divisions there. And cannabis is like the stuff that you get at the legal store, and marijuana is the illegal shit.
See, codifying racism into their policies in the 21st century. The fuck?
Yeah,
It's
it's ridiculous. It's like because they're bending over, they don't want to, and they want to like legalize it, but also not.
only if they control it, and only if there's still a small space where you can be demonized, and the public will accept your demonization because you grew too many fucking plants. You had too much of this product that we sell. in your house. Like, do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? These
yeah,
arbitrary, but it's so it is infuriating, as you say, and it's great that as an artist that you have this outlet, because I've seen so many people that they grasp this concept and it just eats them up inside.
oh
It's one of the
yeah,
reasons
yeah.
I sit here each week and complain about language, is because that's what's being used against us. So in the UK now we have cannabis, we have skunk, and we have medical cannabis,
Okay,
which is mental. So skunk is like our version of marijuana. So it is that kind of racist, classist term used to mean cannabis that we haven't approved or we're not making money off of. That's the dangerous stuff. That's the reason kids are on bicycles stabbing each other up on housing estates. Is because of that skunk stuff. It just makes them mental. And then there's cannabis, which is this sort of benign thing that we've been investigating. And you know, when we prescribe it, it's medical cannabis and it's safe. But if you don't have that piece of paper, that's skunk and it's dangerous. And then they've got hemp on the other side, which is where they try to build the CBD industry and try and separate it, and they just crashed the whole industry. Like the
yeah,
UK scene is collapsed in on itself because nobody can speak in the right words, if you know what I mean. I refuse to use the term really medical cannabis unless I'm writing it and I'll put it in commas with capital M,
yeah,
capital C, proper noun again, because it doesn't mean medical use of cannabis. So we call it prescription cannabis. I bullied one of our um, national organizations here in the UK called the Cannabis Industry Council into changing the name of one of their groups from medical cannabis to prescription cannabis because it creates, like I said, that false binary that if there's medical cannabis, that other stuff isn't medical.
yeah, yeah,
And so it's the same when people say cannabis is medicine. It's like, no, no, no. Cannabis is a plant. Cannabis can be medicine. Like with these languages, they're forcing us down avenues, and this is where we end up squabbling. You're right, most of us, the vast majority of us, want and mean the same thing, but the language that we're stuck to work under is layered. There's like our colloquial terms, the way we use our language. There's then our like dictionary defined language, but in English, you can have like seven definitions of a word, most of them
oh yeah,
contradictory. And then you've got legalese, which is their version of the language when they capitalize certain words and it's structured in a way that it means different things to the colloquial use of the language. So they're writing all this thing, and we're on a nice little treadmill for them, going legalize it, legalize it. And like I say, we're all going, well, why are they still arresting us? If now it's a medicine, why are we having all this drama?
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's and they talk always the talk is always like, oh, we're going to expunge records and all that stuff, and the last thing that ever happens is expungement of records, people getting out of jail. Like that's like absolutely last on the list. Like after
Mm.
every dispensary is opened, after after everybody is like got their medical card, after all of those things are checked off, then some activist group will be like, well, you said you were gonna like expunge us also. And then they eventually, like some states will be like, all right, well, we'll expunge you, but you can't have any other, it has to be just possession or like just possession and use or something. No other charges whatsoever. So all right. So you get arrested with your fucking bong. That's two charges. That's possession of paraphernalia and possession of cannabis. All right, you're not eligible for an expungement. Like, it's so you're right. They really want to draw a line in the sand. Be like, no, these are the good guys and these are the bad guys. Instead of just being like, no, it's just cannabis. It's all right. It's like whatever. Anybody that uses it in any way for any reason, it's legal now. Like whatever. We're removing something. I always thought cannabis would be like a removal of a law and not like implementation of like
Yeah.
a workaround, basically. Like
Well,
they're like they
yeah,
leave the law there and then just do all this legal workaround rather than just
yeah.
remove that and then
Yeah. So exactly, then that's where the lie of legalization comes in the legalize, small L, is defined as the act of making something previously illegal legal. But then you
yeah,
have the quandary and the manipulation again of language of legal versus lawful. And so, as I keep pointing out to people, cannabis cannot be legalized because it is 100% legal already. cannabis has no culpability, no capability to be criminalized. You can't put that plant back there in a courtroom and charge it with existing. What happens is whoever is in possession of it or found to be in possession of it is charged with a cannabis related offense. So the individuals are criminalized. So you're right. The argument has always been wrong. I argue that the sentence should be something along the lines of the ubiquitous decriminalization of all cannabis related offenses and the creation of a legal taxed commercial industry. Because then, like I
Like it's
said,
two separate things.
yeah,
Yeah,
but it should be predicated on us going free first. That's my argument in the
yeah.
UK. So I'm currently fighting against legalization in the UK, and a lot of people in the space are like, "What you
Right.
doing?" And I'm
What are
like,
you doing? You're like, no,
I
you're just
either,
doing it wrong.
yeah,
This happens all the time.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like I'm
yeah,
trying to, and so I'm fighting for the dealers, for the vendors, for
yeah, yeah,
the guys that are now getting belted in New York who built it. They were the ones with the tables and the markets and the pop-ups, and they got the hype and got the customers. And then
yeah.
Big Mayor Adams comes in and goes, I did say you'd
No,
be all
no,
right, but yeah, fuck
pull
you.
you guys
These
out,
big
and we're
boys
fine.
want to come and sell, yeah. And so we're doing the legwork for them. So it's like I said, the evangelicalists in this, the real saviors are those Grateful Dead parking lot
Yeah,
legacy
yeah,
culture people. We've just started a project in the UK called Legacy Culture, a new media centered around UK legacy culture, not just for cannabis, but all legacy cultures. And we're basically trying to create a space for people that have been removed from when a culture becomes co-opted by a mainstream. So the people who, still spelunk and do caving, when that has a pull kind of popular and new people come in and they're tourists.
yeah, yeah.
We want to create media for the lifers because there are people, like I said, that have been in cannabis for forever that are nerds that love this, no matter the law, the legislation, whatever it comes and looks like, they're going to spend time with it. They're the people the law should be written for, not the corporate geezer that went and got some botanical degree because he saw the writing on the wall from 2012 and went, actually, if I go get this, Mike in his finance will get me some big money with venture capitalists and we'll own some cannabis firms. And the guy's
Right.
never smoked weed in his life. He doesn't know the culture, doesn't know what it is to be around weed people and what it is that we're fighting for. Their benefit should be separate. Like I said, that should have to come after our benefit. And it shouldn't be,
Yeah,
oh, no, no, no. We'll make the money, then we'll give you a little bit. That's
yeah,
not social justice or equity. Social justice or equity, like you said, is liberating us first. Then you build that system with a heavily taxed system on it that diverts back to us. But we should have
yeah.
first move advantage, not being, oh, you need licenses and da. We're not going to be commercial, mate. I'm just going to open up my living room and 50 mates are going to come buy my weed and you're going to not do anything about it. These alternative
Sure.
models that are not trapped in these, oh, well, that's a corporate franchise. Well, go, no, we're a non-profit organization. So therefore we're not going to fall under the same remit. You know what I mean? There are these
Yeah, yeah,
alternative access
yeah.
points where we can all make money from growing our own weed together and everyone can flourish. That is
Right.
what I want to see prioritized for a small period while the legislation catches up. Because, like you said, the hemp consumables in America are showing that the sky hasn't fallen. The world hasn't ended, yet people are
Yeah,
consuming
yeah, yeah,
arguably more dangerous products.
yeah. And so so you made a lot of points. I wanted to
Sorry.
mention, so like in Vermont, they did that. They legalized first, and then so they legalized weed and decriminalized weed and growing and everything for like, probably like 4 or 5 years before they actually came up with some kind of uh legalization scheme for other people. So like that actually was great. I mean, not that they ended up with like the best possible plan. Obviously, there's like tons of problems there too, just like everywhere. But uh they took like the gun off the people's heads. Like they stopped arrests. So like now you're negotiating the sales of this product, and there's not like a gun to people's heads like that. Like if you don't if you don't sign this legalization deal today, we're going to arrest 37,000 people this year. You know what I mean? That's gone.
Yeah.
That threat is gone. So if they come up with a bad deal, you're just like, all right, well, we have to come up with a good deal. And it's not like there's not people getting arrested while you're in that negotiation period.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, 100%. It removes that emphasis, that pressure, like you said, against us so that we have the power back. Is it always
yeah.
should be the people who are prejudiced and victim to this system should be the ones in charge of deciding what justice looks like.
And the other thing is that when they first legalized medical cannabis in California in 1996, like the first city and then state to do that, there wasn't like a market or anything to lobby for any of this stuff. So the first laws were actually like much broader and more liberal. Like everybody could grow their own because there was no stores. You had to grow your own, or you had to be part of a grow collective, which is exactly what you talked about, where it's like, you know, this dude like would be like, I know like my dude who I'd be like, all right, you're growing all the weed. We'll pay for everything, whatever, but you know what you're doing, rather than like 50 people all growing their own shitty weed. There's one person that knows what they're doing. They can like grow the weed for everybody. And so like also in Germany, I believe that's what their first rollout is, weed collectives, but they can have up to 500 members, which is like the largest weed collectives ever that's ever happened. Like largest legal weed collectives
Mhm.
that have ever happened. So that'll be interesting to see how that rolls out. 500
Yeah,
person social club basically. It's pretty big. I mean that's like, you know, you have those all over the city. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
yeah,
Who knows what it'll be like, but
yeah.
that's promising. But
Mm,
like that's the thing that needs to happen as like the part of the culture that exists like side by side, I guess, like with a, you know,
mhm.
these the most commercialized version of it. It's like you're talking about like a farmer's market, right? Like you go to a farmer's market, you're buying like whatever your sweet potatoes like directly from the farmer, or like your potatoes, whatever, directly from the farmer. And then also there's this other market of fucking potato chips, and they sell them at like every fucking gas station you could ever imagine. And it's like very disconnected from the potato farmer or like whatever the farmer's market. And like that market, potato chip market, is not even fucking affecting the potato farmer really, or like the organic whatever farmer's market vegetable farmer. Like they're not really even, they're not, it's not affecting each other.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
mean,
that totally happened with cannabis, and that should happen really. Like you're right, there does need to be like this huge fucking like Budweiser of cannabis type thing where that does supply weed to like the average Joe Schmo walking down the street. Like that's going to be a thing, but there needs to be room for everybody else. And what's happening instead of that is that they're saying, no, it's just the big guys. Everybody else go fuck yourself. And they're legally keeping out all these people, even and they're doing it in some cases in ways where they're making it seem like they're not doing that. Where they're like, no, 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 that's
yeah,
a free market. Anybody can get involved, blah, blah, blah. But the ways to get involved in a legal market are actually so cumbersome and expensive that you have to be extremely financially well backed to
mhm.
get into it. So it's really not open to everybody. And the other thing is that another thing that they'll do is say that, okay, in this state, we need whatever 30,000 pounds of marijuana, and that will be enough for the entire state. So, you know, we only need so many growers, so because we only need 30,000 pounds, whatever. But that's like not how fucking competition works at all. It's
Mhm.
that everybody can grow as much as they want, and if some shit gets bought and some shit doesn't get bought, it gets thrown away. It's like it would be like saying you can't start a soda company because we got Coca-Cola. Like
Yeah.
that's enough soda for everybody. And
Mhm.
it's like, no, well, this is better than this is better than Coca-Cola. So like
Mhm.
we all of those things which we think of as part and parcel with capitalism and free market economy, like the idea of like everybody can, the American dream, like everybody can
Yeah.
get involved, the competition, free market, all of those things get stripped away like immediately, and by these huge companies that are supposedly hyper capitalists, but what they're doing is removing competition legally before anybody else can even get started or even try.
Yeah, I think it's as we mentioned before about grabbing young. I think that's what they're trying to do through like brand association and everything else. They want to get people attracted to that space. I mean, I'm not to shit on burner or cookies, but the ubiquity of the brand, the recognizable nature of it, the scale and of what it's become. It's I don't know what his intention was when he created it, but it's become quintessential representative of this new world system that they are building. It's interesting you spoke before about the legalization creates these workarounds. I mean, Canada went from 7 laws to 45 laws overnight when they legalized. And it's just like, wait, what? That's not how this works. You can't quadruple the number of laws and go, well, yeah, we fixed it. And for their expungement, I think for the first 3 years, it cost 600, granted, it's only Canadian dollars. That's not much to you, Yanks. That's the only thing I've picked up from mass media is the Americans take the piss out of the Canadians for having a shit dollar rate. But yeah, it's $600 to get yourself expunged, and it was a cumbersome process, like you said, and it was only requisite if you had just possession alone, and even then, it was possession under a certain level.
Right.
So
For
so it means that if you were then a good grower, but you got caught in any of these spaces, like I said, you're locked out. They've created these rings of access. And I think it's because they couldn't compete with us. They know business and marketing and that Gordon Gekko style of capitalism, greed is good and let's eat the system. That's their game. That's their raison d'etre. They're happy to do that shit. But cannabis is antithetical to that approach, like in and of its nature. So I think a lot of us, like our minded legacy people, get involved in that space and they get thrown around this washing machine and cast out the other side. And they're like, well, shit, we need to fight against that. But
yeah.
because of the power it's got in terms of not just lobbying, like you said, accessibility now I'm restricted and just had one of my oldest cannabis pages removed off Meta. Yeah, I'm constantly fed every 5 fucking thing posts on Instagram adverts for cannabis clinics.
Mm.
It's so backward. They've got the power and the access, and the bigger they get, the more they can get closer to big tech, the more they can get closer to big ag, big pharma, big tobacco, big alcohol. These other look, I mean, Tilray eating shit on the stock market has diversified their products, and I think they're now one of the biggest craft producers in Colorado. Like
Yeah.
they're backdooring. I know
Yeah. Yeah.
Aurora have gone into like ornamental flowers and shit like
Right.
that. And I personally
Yeah.
think part of that is just to get their nutrient regimen cheaper, and they can then
Yeah.
have other products in house that no, we're not putting that on there. Yeah, because that's an ornamental product. We're not allowed to put that on a consumable product. But as the LA Times investigation showed in California
Yeah.
recently, there's some dodgy shit goes on. Legal doesn't equal safe.
Yeah.
Passionate people caring about their plant. I know growers, I've seen growers tear down plants at week 6. Do you know what I mean? That are like, just nah, it's not good. I'm not going to waste the time on it. I've also known growers that have got powdery mildew at week 8 and it's got horrible fucking pest problems. I'll just run that. I sell it. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
smoke it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's the thing that separates people that care about the plant is that passion, and they're the
Yeah.
people who should be finding and championing because they will fight for what is right for cannabis and the people that want to consume it. You can't just say I consume it this way. Say I don't want people smoking it. Like our medical cannabis in the UK, I'm not allowed to smoke my prescription. I have to
Yeah. Yeah.
vaporize my prescription.
Yeah.
It's
We have that in Pennsylvania too. Like, so at first they didn't even sell flour. You couldn't get flour, and then people were like, "No, you can vape flour." But like, so now they have flour, but they're not allowed to sell papers at the weed store because technically you're not supposed to smoke it, or like pipes or anything like that.
Wow. So does that mean will you guys have somewhere on the state books the paraphernalia charge somewhere? Could you then theoretically be a medical patient in Pennsylvania, have your
And
lawful
then get a
weed, and
charge.
then get a
Oh yeah,
charge
yeah,
for having
definitely.
papers and
Mm,
roach?
you
What
could.
the
I mean,
fuck?
if the cop is wants to break your
Hmm.
balls, definitely. If you're a black person, probably. I mean, like that charge is
Yeah.
definitely something that exists.
And
Um,
that's what
but you're not allowed
legalization.
to.
Sorry,
It's like
go.
there's still arrests. Like we have a medical program. There's still like 12,000 arrests in Pennsylvania every year, and it's like these are people that don't have, haven't gotten a card because there's like you have to pay to get the card and like pay to go to the doctor. So, it ends up costing like $300 or something like that to get each year to get your medical weed card. And then it's like you paid all this money to get this card, so you're like, well, I better go to the dispensary to get the weed. And then you end up spending like twice as much money at the dispensary as you would from your other guy. So what happens is a lot is that people get a card and then they let it expire and stop going there because it ends up being too expensive.
Mhm.
And they're like, well, there's all these other alternatives. Like besides even like the local dealer, you could go to a dispensary. In Philly, where I live, you can drive 15 minutes to New Jersey and buy weed legally also. Um, so that whole medical card thing isn't really working where we are now. There's so many ways around it.
Yeah, but yeah, we've got medical cards over here in the UK that are not recognized by the Home Office or the Crown Prosecution Service. There are several of them that are just basically data, what do you call them? Data gathering exercises. They're like, oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
we've got a couple of thousand people, and we give them these cards, and at least some of them are like they only take on prescription people, and it's like proof of prescription, but you don't need the card. Your paper is enough protection. But it's the same thing of like, so when I was saying before about like cannabis is 100% legal, it is about lawful and unlawful. So it's about whether you are in lawful possession or committing a lawful act with that cannabis in the same way as like a knife. So in your kitchen, chopping up herbs or whatever, knife is perfectly lawful. Put that knife in your waistband in the UK and walk on the street with it, that's an unlawful possession. So it's not
right,
about legal, illegal. So then the lawful thing comes down to whether you have exemption, authorization, or license. They're the three things that the state can give you that means you can lawfully be in possession or lawfully. So, like police officers, when they take your cannabis off you, they're authorized by the state to hold that. That's why other cops don't arrest other cops for being in possession.
right,
So it's the way that sort of system is set up, but it's then very weird that again, in a card like being a license, we have license for driving, for example, because everybody should have a minimum level of education to get in a potentially lethal vehicle. All
right.
cars are potentially dangerous by their nature. Well, they're not. Driven incorrectly, the car could be dangerous because the car isn't just going to suddenly drive off by itself. Although saying that, some of these electric fucking vehicles, we are hearing some hilarious but also dangerous stories of people going like the accelerator stuck on and I
Uh,
had to crash it.
Hard to
It's
drive.
yeah. So I just it's again it goes back to that absurdity that if it's legal, if we're making it lawful, as it were, if we're using those interchangeably like most people do, why then? Am I accepting this thing that you're saying it must be dangerous? That's why I need authorization. It's like you said about fatty foods or fucking sugar or additives. California just banned or seeking to ban Skittles because of several additives that are considered to be carcinogenic. Like why aren't they got a license? Why can't you get? Do you not have to get a license to go to McDonald's? That's
Yeah,
infinitely
yeah,
more dangerous in the long term than fucking cannabis consumption.
yeah, yeah. All these things. Yes. I mean, just sugar in general, McDonald's, like, and they advertise to children and everywhere to everyone,
Mhm.
in every way possible. Um, and so there's all these like arbitrary things placed on cannabis due to 100 years of stigma, and I think that places like smart, well, deviously smart people use that stigma to push laws that benefit them financially.
Mm.
And so like that stigma not only, you know, makes the cannabis user, feel like shit or whatever, it's also being used to hoodwink government officials to, or not hoodwink them, or just bring them along on these little ways to profit off of this. And
Mm.
those are the laws that we're getting. We're not getting laws that are actually something, providing justice or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I wondered, do you think that because of the way that all drugs are so intertwined in legislation historically with the approach of like the war on drugs, prohibition, etc., that part of the hesitation of not just the US state, but like as in the federal state, but governments and the states of various countries around the world are so hesitant because once they allow cannabis to go and everyone's like, nothing bad happened. In fact, health improved. People are drinking less. People are taking less pharmaceutical drugs. They're living longer. They're being more conscious, more conscientious, more whatever. Then we've got to have this conversation about what the hell are you doing with the other drugs, guys? Especially now that they're seeking to, medicalize so many things like psilocybin containing mushrooms, MDMA, DMT, ayahuasca, various other things. Like they're co-opting again cultural rituals, rites of passage, traditions, heritage of something they don't understand, and they're going, well, it makes these people happy, and they're trying to then go, well, let's replicate this. Let's stick them in a room
Yeah,
with a blindfold on, give them a synthetic version of psilocin, and then do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
miss the point. I don't see how they have the hubris, the arrogance to be like, no, no, no. If you're going to change your brain, I've got to be in the room there. You can't see God
yeah,
without
yeah,
me being there. Do you know what I mean? It's what it feels like. It's like you're not allowed to go off and just be that
yeah,
creative, sorry, experience that wondrous creative part of your brain that is frankly alien to us all. These substances allow us to explore that inner space, and yeah, it can be scary and it could be potentially dangerous. But this is where setting, experience, and a
yeah, yeah.
compassionate response comes in. You know.
They just they didn't pass it, but they released a bill for legal mushrooms in New Jersey, and yes, it was like that. It was like, you have to take it at a psilocybin dispensary center in the company of a professional psilocybin doctor or something like that. And I'm like, that sounds like the worst possible thing. And then so they do this with ketamine, right?
Hmm.
And that's legal, and they're doing that in here in Philly. They do that. You can do that. Costs $1,000, um, and it's like per dose, and you have to sit there, with the doctor. And it's like basically like in a dentist chair, kind of,
Oh,
uh,
goodness.
and take. It just looks so not
Mm.
not like fun at all, or like not an experience that you'd want to have.
See, that's interesting. You I just clocked to something there, but an artificial binary that they basically are pushing. This is therapeutic, not fun.
Right,
Do you know
right.
what I mean? It's almost it's still it's this puritanical, pseudo
Yeah.
Orthodox Christian kind of
Like, how
attitude
can we
of,
make it so that you're not actually enjoying it in
yeah,
any way?
it'll make you a good
Meanwhile,
little
sit there
capitalist.
with
It'll deal with your
people.
depression so you can go back to your job and pay the taxes and keep buying the shit and keep going to McDonald's and keep drinking the Coca-Cola and keep doing the it's
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's putting us out, putting the fire out and then kicking us back into the burning building. Yeah. Damn, it's so weird though, because so many people have just kind of resolved themselves to resound to just going, oh, but it's happening. And they assume that, oh yeah, it's just the hiccups now, that eventually it'll all be right for us in the end. If it as if we don't need to help shape this, that
Right.
I can't I can't accept that level of naivety. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I've been in this space too long, but it's so
No, it
hard to
happens all
reach
the
those
time too.
people.
It's, just shut up and enjoy it. Like, it's fine. Like, whatever. I can buy weed now.
Mhm.
Like, I'm like, no, but it actually isn't. It sucks though. You're like, no, you're just being a wet blanket. Yeah, no, no, that's constant issue as well. I mean, yeah, but that's why I think like comics is helpful. Like, people see comics and it's not like, you know, I think they're like willing to give it a chance and read it maybe rather than at least read it from beginning to end, rather than interrupting you during a conversation, or
Mhm.
comics like hold the person hostage. Like the drawings kind of like suck the person in and hold them hostage and make them sit there and listen to you for a few minutes. And whereas like sometimes in conversation and in comments or whatever, people stop listening, people won't listen to the whole thought, will immediately interrupt, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if there's. I was thinking that as you were talking, if it's something to do with we're very open-minded as children, most of us. Get like given the best sort of environment possible, obviously, myself included, you can have some quite volatile childhoods, but
Yeah,
generally you are quite accepting of the world around you. You're very open to new ideas. You're very suggestible, and then as you grow older, this skepticism kind of comes in. And I wonder if there's something to the form of comics that is a nostalgic thing. Even if you didn't read comics as a kid, you know that that was sort of an art form that was acceptable. And so it's the digestibility, like you said. You're not intimidated by just written form. I mean, I'm sorry, I can write a 5,000 word article overnight and still be like, damn it, I haven't conveyed my point, I need more words. um so I think it stops people being intimidated by sort of the word length of it. And like you said, if they can, even
yeah,
if they've sort of flicked through, you can read a comic in like, not doesn't need to listen left to right to down. You can kind of go over it fast and come back to it and then really absorb on a certain section and
sure.
notice something in the background that changes the context. You can go and read it in different moods and it appears in different ways. It's a very versatile art form. It what's the word, transmits so much information in such powerful short bursts. I think it does supersede a lot of people's sort of skepticism, or just like, well, I'm not listening to you, because it's not, they're seeing that, I don't know, it feels more than just a person, as we alluded to earlier, than just a person speaking. It's a very rich, it feels like it's nutritious. Do you know what I mean? There's something filling about it. I don't know. My language fell apart there, but I think I conveyed my point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like to talk about how like when you get on an airplane, they give you like this little sheet that tells you like what to do in case of an emergency, and it kind of like looks like a comic strip, and it's
Mm,
like made to convey like really important information really quickly, to a lot of different people. And like that's kind of like the
mm.
power of comics right there,
The
know.
universality to it, that even if they can't read the words, the imagery tells the story.
Yeah, you can kind of pick up on what's going on. I have actually a bunch of French comics that I kind of appreciate and kind of know what's happening, but don't exactly know because I don't really speak French or whatever. But
Mm.
it's still like something worthwhile to look at.
100%, 100%, man. I think that in any craft, I mean, I read a lot because as a writer, I tend to want to always hone in my own skill set, you know what I mean? And I'll deliberately try and go out of my way to read things that I'm like, I kind of don't care about this. The subject bores me or whatever, but it's different, written in a different form. It's a different voice. It's a different thing. It's adding something else to the potential of my craft. It's giving me another tool in the toolkit. It's broadening sort of my horizons. So I think it's important for everybody in whatever craft they pursue, whether it be professionally or in a hobby or part time, whatever, that you never allow yourself to get too, I don't know, high on your own supply, I guess. You know what I mean? It's always good to have your own creativity and your own authenticity, but I don't know, it's good to look around and to take inspiration. I can't remember whose quote it was. Oh, what is the quote? It's about stealing art, that is it, all art is stolen, but only no, all art is stolen, but only the best is. I can't think what the quote is off the top of my head there, but it's basically like, yeah, all art is steal. We call it homage, but it's
Yeah, yeah,
but we're stealing from each other, but we're growing. That's how the human species works. You know what I mean? Look at kids together, and as they figure things out, with limited
yeah,
linguistical
yeah.
skills, and they evolve through that with the same thing, just on the macro scale. And I think whatever art form, like I said, you pursue, people do it with passion and authenticity, because you'll find your audience, man. You'll find an audience.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I didn't know I'd uh, have a million, not a million, but like all these cannabis people reading my cannabis strip. Like originally it was like, you know, just because venting my own frustrations, really. But I just
Mhm.
found out that like a lot of people have the same frustrations.
Yeah, it's like a lighthouse in darkness. It is. It's whenever I see one of your pieces come up on my Instagram timeline, because it is probably the only social media I spend time on. It's the least restrictive of all the restrictive ones, but we'll talk about censorship in a minute. But yeah, when they come up, I love seeing the number of names of people that are, again, the contemporaries within the space, and people that are some big hitters. They're all like, yeah, liking and on that, and I'm like, yes, this is a forum to have this conversation. And
Yeah,
it just shows the the diversity of the creativity of cannabis. It's one of the things I always advocate and argue on this podcast is that could you imagine Broadway if we'd have continued the criminalization of homosexuality?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? How shit it would be. Can you imagine how terrible films would be? You think of the choreography in music, think of music and artistry, think of every pursuit of passion would be lessened. And imagine what could happen if we unshackled every one of these cannabis people to pursue their creativity, their highest calling, and celebrate the plant and not have to worry about, oh, if I use the wrong word there, am I going to get censored? Like I've seen
Yeah.
this obviously going through this recently. We're having to strike through the
Yeah.
words cannabis, and like it just frustrates me that we should have this opportunity to just be as loud and as proud. There should be cannabis pride. There should
Right.
be this thing, but it's we even within our own spaces, like you said, it's people, shh, don't rock the boat. Don't rock. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, people telling you to not rock the boat, they're making fucking money off this.
Yeah.
When you're at home going, well, actually, I'll only grow the 3 plants because actually, if I grow the 5 plants, I might get in trouble. Like, no, fuck
Yeah.
that. They're playing every part of the game and system to maximize their profit, get their Benz, get their yacht. They're in that capitalist game. You shouldn't then be scared of the restrictions of the
Oh,
like
this
I'm
tiny.
protect yourself by all means, folks. But if you got a passion, play. If you want to grow, plant the fucking seed. Just be sensible. Carbon filters, fucking thermal screening. Do you know what I mean? Vibration from fans and stuff like this. Just be sensible. Start small. Find the passion, and it may grow into a lifelong hobby and a way to take autonomy of your healthcare. Is the main way I look at it. If they're saying
Yeah.
I'm allowed it, but I'm not buying their shit. If they're saying I'm allowed it, and I've got that's a nice pot there. Oops. That's lawful weed there, mate. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's
Yeah. Plus, you get to meet a lot of good people. You never regret, um, connecting with other like-minded individuals.
feels like coming home.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it helps us deal with the gaslighting, with the bullshit and the lies and the disinformation that they pump out. And yeah, you
Right.
see,
'Cause you're always like, oh, you hear this stuff too? Like, you see this too?
yeah, and it's the effect that can have on the human psyche to know that there are others. It's the I'm Spartacus sort of thing that when we all stand up together and we see that there is a lot more of us than there is of them. They may have co-opted and snuck into our spaces and they're in our forums and on our websites and producing articles and do you know what I mean? Their
Yeah.
narrative is there, but we have to challenge that. We have to counter their bullshit with truth. We have to be unashamed and unafraid to put our head above the parapet. I mean, they'll try and censor us, they'll try and restrict us, they'll try and do whatever they can, but ultimately, the arc of history is long and it bends towards justice. We may have the blips of atrocities and everything else that can occur within the human experience, but generally, the species we're heading towards altruism. We're heading towards let's not fuck each other over. It's gonna take us a long
Yeah.
time to get there, and I think cannabis
Yeah.
is a resource that will allow us that if we truly, allow it to be unbridled and free and wild. Um, but yeah, it's mental. The we have to fucking make these spaces for ourselves. That there isn't the cannabis spot on the high street for us, but there's their dispensary. There isn't our voices on TV, yet there's their adverts for their clinics. There isn't our authentic experiences being documented. There is a few cherry-picked patients that promote and go, "Oh,
Yeah.
this company is the best company ever." Do
Right.
you know what I mean? It just feels so sanitized, so
Oh, yeah.
manipulative, and just it's wrong. So I think again, I want to praise you because I think the work you're doing is fucking phenomenal, drawing attention to these things. It's unceasing to me, like unceasingly surprising. The intricacy of the things you'll go into on some of your things as well. Like I flick and go, oh, that's it in the what? And it's something that otherwise, I mean, I read a lot of news around the world about cannabis, but I wouldn't have caught that. So
Mm.
by doing it, like you said, you highlight these. Well, I didn't want to use the word atrocities there because that's not an applicable term. These, terrible things that are being committed upon the legacy culture, and in a digestible way that others can yeah really like hopefully come to understand. I know, like you said, your comment section might not reflect that understanding.
No, I like. I mean, sometimes people are assholes, obviously, but like I think it's good when they're all people are yelling at each other sometimes because it's like healthy debate kind of.
Shows the care.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And we're at the time, so let's look to sort of wrap up. I did want to actually, we danced around it a bit there. I wanted to ask you about sort of censorship on social media.
Oh
Obviously,
yeah.
as an award-winning cartoonist, as somebody that has quite a back catalogue of extensive work that is recognized in some, senior publications around the world, that why like how you're being affected by this
Oh, it's so annoying.
censorship.
So like you have to. So my account still is not like theoretically like clean. Like it's still not being like recommended or anything because like one of the comic strips a few weeks ago, like whatever, I don't know, like broke some. I keep like you can appeal the decision over and over again, and sometimes they change their mind or whatever. But you're like, it's like playing a video game. You're like talking to a robot, whatever. You're chatting with like a robot, trying to get them to. I'm always like, listen, this is not selling weed at all. It's a comic strip about weed. Like, and they're like, oh, blah blah blah. They, the whole support on Meta is like not a real thing. It's like I think it's just a scam to get you to pay for like whatever $12 a month it is.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's a real pain. And then so every time I make the comic, I have to like censor part of it to make sure it doesn't like get like picked up by this like algorithm, and then it gets like whatever. It's a real pain, and everybody in cannabis like goes through it. I'd be like, but like they could also like delete your account, and that would be a real pain. Like you spent like all this time building an audience, and then they delete your account. You have to start over again. It takes time to build that audience back up. Like, and really like this is that. Imagine like doing that to your users of any. Imagine like whatever. There's like a crew of Beanie Babies people that are still selling Beanie Babies and stuff, and there's millions of users doing it. But like if you mention Beanie Babies, they'll kick you off of their platform. It's like they would never do that because it's like a huge part of their customer base. Like they're just like really treat. And then at the same time, there's tons of ways to like, get around all of this stuff to the point where like people are selling like all kinds of shit, like literal DMT and shit, like all that stuff being
Mhm.
sold and advertised on Instagram via like burner accounts and stuff like that also. So like they have all this like AI algorithm shit that's supposed to be protecting their site, but it just traps up all these people that are not doing. I think like YouTube and stuff does this too, because like people, have all these like YouTubeism words that they have to use instead of like they can't say suicide, they have to say like unalive
Yeah.
myself, and they have to say SA because you can't say sexual assault because so like that's what they're creating with all this with Meta is creating too. It's like you have to like literally you can talk about all these subjects, but you just have to like not say the words that trigger the algorithm. And it's just like, is that really an effective way to police your site? I don't know if it is.
Mm. No, it's yeah, the YouTube terms of servicification of our lexicon is very frustrating to me. Because the word stands as a meaning, a common thing within the collective consciousness of the speakers of that language. So when I say red, everyone that speaks English knows what red is. You know the
Yeah.
color red. It's a universal thing, red. If I start having to use different things to describe that and we lose the color red, it's like what happens in it's like the opposite actually of what trying to remember who Winston Smith's colleague was in 1984, who's working on the Newspeak dictionary. And they're like saying how they're going to break down the language and get rid of all these arbitrary other words, and everything will be referenced within like a spectrum of five. So it'll be like double good or double bad or not good
Right.
sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so they've figured out a way that if they can break the language, they can stop us communicating. And so it does really, I see so many people like vendors, dealers, and people that I support. Do you know what I mean? As long as you're selling them with adults, then
Yeah, yeah,
then
yeah.
then yeah, I'm down with that. They want drugs, you've got drugs. That's a marriage
Yeah.
made in heaven. You know what I mean? You guys are set. That's good. But the way they'll get around it, and then I'm like, no, but I want to use the word cannabis because cannabis encompasses everything of this. When I say cannabis sativa L, that is the Latin uh, collective word for all of the subgenus of cannabis, and everything will fit into that, whether we want to call it hemp, marijuana, medical, whatever. It's cannabis. We've got the standardization of the word for it, but if they then break that word or then go, you can't say cannabis, but you can say medical cannabis. You've then got people going, oh, pictures from a legal state. It'll then say like, oh, medical cannabis patient, da 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 da, and then it'll have like a Telegram link to buy weed from them. And it's when imagine you're an 18-year-old, like I was an 18-year-old back when. Granted, I started a lot younger, but if I'm suddenly 18 and wanting to get into weed, there's two options. You can go into the lawful space and go on their website and cannabis, cannabis, and all the words and all the language, and it's kind of proto-correct. It's enough, and it indoctrinates you, and you get stuck in that system, and you're happy, and you never think about the peripheral other sides of it. But if you wanted to then learn about the history, about the parallel reality that's going on, about legacy culture and this ongoing struggle, you need these words to find people. If you can't go onto Instagram and type in cannabis, how are you going to find you or me or somebody else? Do you know what I mean? If that word is then restricted and you don't know our names, you will never connect with us. You've then got to build somehow, find one person, then almost go through. This is good tips for you folks. Go through there, then followers, find other big accounts from there that you're interested in, and then you can build a chain. And then eventually the algorithm will recognize. Granted, it'll still filter out a lot of people, but it'll start to push you towards some accounts, and you can build an account that gives you access to education and information. There are a lot of accounts that still do. We're just not monetizable. I mean, I've been in fighting with Google AdSense since I started this project. I've
Yeah,
long since surpassed their criteria, and they're just like, no, just keeps coming back. Just
yeah,
basically
yeah. Same
no. And
thing
I'm
with
like, what do you mean no? It's like,
Instagram. Like, I can't advertise my comic strip on Instagram. It just doesn't. There's no way I can't appeal it. I've done it like. There's no way for me
and,
to
yeah. And like you said,
advertise.
that there are people that have got smart to it and gone, actually, I'm going to put up an advert for orange juice or whatever, get it past the meta verification, then haha, I'm going to take it down. Here we go, DMT, and then a DMT, $200 a gram, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, and it doesn't get caught up again. So it's not capturing the things that they think it's capturing. All it's
Yeah,
doing is stopping meaningful conversations, the potential of harm reduction, education and information, and awareness about benefit maximization. And
yeah,
connecting with like-minded people, like you said, is that if they're scared of potential problematic dependencies with drugs, cannabis, I think, is a different thing. But if they believe that, consuming together is the best self-regulating mechanism we have. That's why we have pubs. You know, you, Dave, and Mike go down, you get a bit too Larry, barmate cuts you off. You know, bouncers like, I think, lads, you should probably leave, calls you a taxi, you get a pizza on the way home. There's a whole infrastructure
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
regulate that human behavior. No one in any of this has said anywhere we should make alcohol unlawful. Yet it's comorbid in 100 plus health conditions. It's related directly to causing or causal and correlatory, than arguing about sort of the language, to 15 different types of cancer. Yet no one would ever dare say that. And that's a descheduled drug.
yeah.
So
That's totally fun.
it's about education. Like I said, the reason McDonald's can exist, Coca-Cola, all these other things is they're predicated on the idea that you're allowed this. It's a tasty treat every now and then. Oh yeah, it might spike your glucose and da da da. But if you consume it for a long time, it could be dangerous. But that's your fault. It's not
Yeah,
Coca-Cola's fault. They've got no responsibility. We're not going to restrict. You only had 4 bottles of Coke. Coke would go
yeah, yeah,
fucking mental if you put a
yeah.
restriction on them. Do you know what I mean? None of these companies that would allow it. It's
Oh, they did go mental when in Philly they put a tax on soda and they spent
Ooh.
tons and tons of money to like argue against like this whatever 25-cent tax on a liter of soda or whatever the hell it is. Like it's such a small thing.
Mm.
Uh, and yeah, they went nuts totally.
See, I think we're doing it wrong. I don't think they should punish the consumer through higher pricing. I think they should be taxing gross profits of these
Yeah,
corporations. 100%
yeah,
is at the end of the day, take their shit. When it's their pile and they're like, oh, then step in and take some of it. Don't go, oh, you've got to pay this thing and allow them to pass it on to the
Yeah.
consumer because we've seen what that's happened. We've had what have we had recently?
Oh,
Shrinkflation, deflation, inflation. Products and services and monetary pricing has gone fucking batshit because the Americans, you guys printed, I think, nearly $2 trillion. The Brits, we printed 800 billion pounds, and just fucking gave it to the richest people. And then they had nothing to do, so they went and bought all the shit. And then everything got
yeah.
expensive and we went, oh, the cost of living crisis. You're like, the fucking rich people. What did they do with that? They're investing it into things like cannabis and going, well, I want a good return. Do you know what I mean? We're going to put it into this. And so they're lobbying against, as you point out in some of your comic strips, like home growing, against these community driven initiatives, against social equity and justice schemes, against, the licensing being connected in some way towards some form of what they used to call, I guess, transformative justice.
Yeah.
It's,
It transformed the conversation, man.
yeah, it's,
Very
it's a
big problem.
it's a huge problem, and it's global. I think is winning the Second World War, as I think the American financial system did, allowed for this Americana to be exported around the world. That even parts that are not in the Anglosphere are still quite Americanized in terms of its corporate structure, in terms of the globalization of the American dream, as it were. Do you know what I mean? Of this aspiration to be that capitalist self-made entrepreneur, when frankly there is no such thing as a self-made billionaire. It just doesn't happen. No one is going from a slum to I'm saying that actually of my study of the Western world. There probably will be somebody in India or elsewhere um, that may have risen because of the sheer size of the economy or whatever. But yeah, it's generally money goes to money. And I think if we don't step in with some reasonable regulations, the same people that were fucked over by prohibition are going to be impoverished by legalization. Like I said, they're just further taxes are going to take more out of their communities. And they'll say, oh, yeah, we're going to fix the potholes in the nice neighborhood. Oh, yeah, we're going to fund the schools in the nice neighborhood. Oh, yeah, we're going
Yeah.
to fund the parks in the nice neighborhood. Do you know what I mean? It becomes then this, and the law still exists, as you said, of going, that racist cop goes, was that a black youth? I think he's got cannabis on him. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, just shit like this, it allows, I always say any continuation of restriction on the individual is a continuation of prohibition. And unless you actually seek to end prohibition, legalization means nothing but capitalist exploitation of the lower classes.
Yeah.
Well,
That's certainly what's happened here. The proof is in the pudding.
yeah, it's crazy, but I do have hope. Like I said, your comment section does give me hope when you put up something, and there are, like you said, the odd idiot, the odd contrarian. That's what the internet was made for. But there are a lot of people that, like I said, get it. I think more people are getting it, and more people are starting to try and produce meaningful content and to have these wider conversations beyond just the binary of, oh, keep it going with prohibition or just legalize it. Like they're starting to understand, well, what does legalize mean? Who is impacted by that? Who profits from this? And so, yeah, I'm optimistic. I mean, what do you think about rescheduling? Do you think that'll happen before the November election?
No, I don't think that it will. And I also don't, even if it does happen, even if say it happened right before the election, it's not, it's not, it's a not a, it's basically like a lateral move. Like it's not really a move towards the goal line. It's a step kind of to the side, that well, it's kind of just throwing a wrench in the engine of like what's going on. Like if there's more unknowns to what's going to happen than knowns. Like
Hmm.
so, it's you know everybody. I would imagine that like 90% of the comments in the comment period are people saying that we should deschedule this, not reschedule it. And so I don't know what could happen. That could be anything, you know. And it's really not the right thing to reschedule. It needs to be carved out the same way alcohol and tobacco is.
Yeah, I think that's the only rational approach. I think that anybody that can see this without the kind of propaganda of the reefer madness history of prohibition or the propaganda and marketing and advertising tricks of the legalization lobby can just go, well, wait a minute, if tobacco kills X amount of people a year and alcohol kills X amount of people a year and they're not in this system, and the people can drink as much as they want and smoke as much as they want. Obviously, various states and townships will have some forms of limited restrictions across the country in the states. But in a general point, it's no, it's your freedom. But
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
yeah, when it comes to cannabis, all of a sudden, everyone just went, "You're right." And I think, as you pointed out before, it is that hangover of, but all of that war must have been because it was dangerous, and now they've made it safe. Do you know what I mean? They're trying to like do this mental
yeah,
gymnastics to figure it out, rather than like you pointed to Nixon. I think it was 1993. A guy called John Ehrlichman, who was his
yeah.
drug advisor, came out and basically said like, did we know we were wrong about the war on drugs? And they're like, well, hell yeah. We basically wanted to associate the anti-war left with marijuana and the blacks with heroin and cocaine, and then we could criminalize them, demonize them on the evening news night after night, break up their communities and their organizations. They said it, and that would be for me in 20 years when we're talking about legalization. That same quote's going to come out. Did we know we were wrong about legalization? Of course we were. But we wanted to ensure that we could make the profits, protect the other industries, vilify those horrible hippies that are still talking about anti-war movements, those horrible people talking for social equity and justice. Like those, they're the druggies. These are good little capitalists. Look at him going in the dispensary and buying his ounce. Thank you.
Yeah. Uh,
Do you know what I mean? It's just this mental system that the more people like yourself can draw attention to it, I think the more chance we have of enough people hitting that critical mass, that 100th monkey, and we all go, let's fucking get that monkey. He's the one fucking us up. You know what I mean? Because it's a small group of that capitalist people that are like trillions though. We'll be everything. We'll own a lot of it, man. Yeah, we'll make clothing. Yeah, we'll make bricks. We'll make batteries. We'll sell them all the drugs. That's what they're thinking of at the end of the day. But most of us that have lived this war are thinking about what peace could look like. We don't care what industry looks like. I want to know what it's like when I can walk down the street with my joint like I could a cigarette. I want to know what it's like when I can just pitch up with a bunch of people somewhere and not have to worry about how I smell. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? I want to know what that feels like, the cessation of that pressure and that demonization of my life. And I don't think legalization is going to give me that.
it really is still like, not like that. It's in like plenty of places where it's legal.
Yeah.
They really want to, section you off and put you in a certain spot. That's why there's no consumption in public, or they want to hide everything and hide, regulate the packaging and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think a lot of the American states have followed what the Brits did and sort of banned smoking in like alcohol pubs or alcohol consumption spaces, as it were. So you just step outside, but then you're in a restaurant and there's families. You're drinking alcohol. That's fine. I'm not saying that you should
Yeah,
be sat at the table smoking a bong, but like you said, if there was then a different area, like air sealed, like in where did I go once? O'Hare Airport, and they have this fucking glass cube in like the middle of one of the terminals, and people go in and
oh yeah, yeah,
smoke, and it goes
uh,
yellow, and yeah, like
yeah, yeah,
you can accommodate people. You
yeah.
should accommodate people. You shouldn't then just be ostracizing them because they sin differently to you. And I think that's the lesson that we're going to learn from legalization, either this side of it becoming ubiquitous across the world and us all still having to fight this fight for another 10, 20 years, or if we're lucky, enough minds and hearts are one that we go, no, 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 that's injustice. You haven't listened to these people. You haven't liberated them. Look at what happened to the families of Humboldt. You know what I mean? They're fucking decimated. Look at the legacy groups, like you said, the people that existed under 215 and saved so many
Yeah.
fucking lives that are just
So
gone.
much of the cannabis industry in California, just in general, like just got they peeled off a ton of people by changing that law.
Mm,
Um, just via like regulation and you know for certain, like you were talking about, language and like the way they wrote that out. It just like put a ton of people out of business and shrunk the industry really.
mm.
And you think about that in any other industry, you would call that an absolute failure. And I don't think anybody's taking any kind of like responsibility for it in that way in California.
Same sort of anywhere, really. It's interesting that people have got a little bit skirty because I think Colorado's most recent sale figures are down $700 million.
Mm.
And so a few people are, oh. And my theory has always been, and I think we're going to see it happen, there is always going to be a limit on legalization. And you spoke of Germany before. I think their system's going to be interesting because of the restrictions placed upon the consumer of 50 grams a month.
Mm.
And only 3 plants per household per year at a maximum weight of 50 grams for all 3 plants, which if you've ever grown a cannabis plant, folks, you're aware that's quite a small yield. Um, I think those arbitrary restrictions are then just going to create and incentivize a market for people to fill the needs of them once they've maxed out their 50 grams.
Oh yeah.
Wherever we create that line, if there's people, if we, and this is what I was saying about like decriminalization. My ideal model for any country would be, let's create a czar and a person who's in charge of this in the government, and they're going to observe this. Let's decriminalize all cannabis-related offenses at a certain level. So I don't know, 1,000 plants or 100 plants or whatever, and then just observe that model. And then over time, build the legislation around the mean of the culture. There may be the extremes of some guy trying to cash crop 10,000 plants or whatever. Okay, we maybe want to find fence here, and do you know what I mean? And that's the mean of the culture. Legislate to that, because then within a
Yeah.
few years, everything will fall in that and no one will be criminalized. And you don't need to put criminal sanctions either side of this. You can put a penalty, sorry, like a, what's the word? A charge in place for the people at the
Yeah.
top and go, okay, any plant over 1,000 plants is going to cost you 80% of your profits. And then so nobody would grow over 1,000 plants. Or do you know what I mean? There's other
Yeah.
mechanisms of restriction that we can put into place to push a certain set of behaviors, but it has to be around the majority of the behavior. Otherwise, we'll just
Yeah.
go
What do
fuck
you
you and
do?
do it anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah, it's mental. It's mental. I want to do two quick fire questions actually, because I saw when I was reading through things, you did a joint project, the Accidental Tsar. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on. I'm not going to ask you about the Russian war or that kind of level of politics. I'm purely wanted to know, do you think that Putin's got long? Like, do you think that Russia can survive in its current form once he's gone? Because in my understanding of it, he is basically modern Russia.
Yeah. No, I mean, I learned a lot making that book. I don't, every time I think that he's like just about to be stamped out, like he gets like this big second wind. And so he might just be there till he dies.
Hmm.
And then it's like, who knows what's going to happen after that, because it'll be like a power vacuum and it'll be another big mess and, whatever. But I think that's his goal, is to stay there till he dies.
I think that seems to be, we're living in a geriocracy. And I think with
Yeah.
given your upcoming election, we're starting to see this thing of old men clinging to power.
Yeah.
Um, and it's awkward. I mean, have you ever seen the film The Death of Stalin?
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's kind of going to be that kind of thing. It's going to be a nice, light little la la la, and they'll figure the shit out. I'm
Yeah.
really
I
hoping
love
it's
that
not the
movie.
other extreme option, which is a huge destabilization of large parts of the global economy. People go, "Oh, Russia, backward Russia." You're like, do you guys know what these fuckers produce? Do you know how much of global trade they produce? Do you know how involved they are in keeping other nations at bay as well, same as the West are? You know what I mean? There's a lot that when one of these things go down, the entire landscape of the face of the earth is going to change. I don't know. I'm quietly optimistic that climate change is going to make Serbia and the Serbian regions very good climate for growing cannabis, and hopefully the Russians will move on to smoking a lot more weed and chill the fuck out. Awesome. I suppose I wanted to also ask you what you're currently working on, sort of future projects. Obviously, by you looking at your other stuff you've worked on, as you said, you're very much in this period of passion around cannabis. But you sort of penning anything else at the minute? You got any other ideas?
Yeah, actually, I'm working on a fiction book right now that's going pretty slowly. Um, about halfway done with it, but I don't get a lot of opportunity to work on it because I'm doing like other illustration work. But it's coming slowly but surely. There'll be a new book, in addition to all the Legalization Nation stuff.
Nice. Is that your first nonfiction?
And I did one other one called
Sorry,
Child Star
fiction rather. I got
Fiction. Yeah,
confused in my
I
head
did
there.
one called Child Star a couple years ago. Um, so I don't know. It's interesting experience. It's a lot different than like Legalization Nation.
Hmm. Excellent. All right then. I wrote that like 3 days ago, and I'm not even going to ask that as a stupid fucking question. Literally written on this piece of paper. Is it actually always sunny in Philadelphia?
Uh,
I'm fucking ridiculous.
it's hot as hell right now, I'll say that
See, I'm British. I'm obsessed with the weather. No, I just wanted to get
much.
that pun in there because I do think it's a fantastic TV show. I think
Yeah.
it surprisingly became, is it the longest running live action series
Is
now?
it really?
I think it
Yeah.
passed that recently, which was amazing considering its multiple controversies. But again, another great art form that tells truths and true stories of humanity in wonderful ways. Uh, all right. Where can people follow your work? Where can they get a hold of? Yeah,
So I have a website, boxbrown.com, and also I'm on all social medias and stuff as Box Brown. And, mostly post on Instagram, but I'm on Twitter too sometimes. And so you can find me there.
excellent, excellent. Do you post internationally?
Yeah. Uh, but it is extremely expensive to send a book to anywhere outside the United States, but I definitely will do that if people are interested.
Okay, folks, if you're happy to drum up for the postage, then there you go. You can get access to them. It's not something I've been considering, but since a little
If you
break,
are in the UK, actually, you can get my comics at OK Comics, which is a shop in Leeds, but I think they might also ship from where they are. And so they carry Legalization Nation, so you can
oh,
check that out too.
awesome. I was gonna say because it's just something I want. There's quite a few Americans work that I want, but because of Brexit recently, the cost to get things in have gone through the
So
fucking
expensive.
roof. So that's good to know, folks. I'll include a link below for any of my UK listeners. And I suppose Europeans, you'd be paying less in the surcharge to get it shipped from this little isle to the mainland. So yeah, do check out all of Brian's work. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking the time today. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
No worries, no worries. Actually, I do have my last cliche question as well, which is what are we not talking about that we really should be talking about?
Oh, sheesh. I don't know. There's so much chatter about everything. Um, I hardly think that uh, there's much not being talked about, but I occasionally do think of things where I'm like, hey, why doesn't anybody talk about that? But I got nothing right now. I'm uh, I'm at a loss.
I think that maybe speaks to we should listen more. I think we all, I mean, I literally talk on this podcast every week and write constantly, but I do try and listen. But I think, yeah,
Yeah.
striking that balance, isn't it? Listening and speaking. That is communication 101, folks. There you go. You've just learned how to talk. That's a perfect summation for this podcast, folks. I'm going to let Brian go. I'm going to do some housekeeping. Yeah, once again, thank you very much for your time, Brian. I'll be editing and posting this out, I think today, because it is this week's episode. So
Cool.
I'll be tagging you in some links later on today.
All right. Awesome.
Excellent. All right.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much.
No worries. Take it easy. Peace and love, man.
Later.
Bye. Well, there you go, folks. That was Brian Box Brown. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. I know I did. It's always great to speak to creatives in different spaces and different, I suppose, facets of the industry. Brian is someone that I've wanted to speak to for quite a while. I've followed his work. I want to say for quite a while, but I can't actually remember offhand when I first sort of discovered his comics. Um, but yeah, really appreciate his work with Legalization Nation. As I said, I'll include links below, folks. Do check him out if you are on Instagram. Definitely worth following because it also works as I suppose, a little news source that you could be kept abreast of, some nuance in different spaces across the industry, or rather within different aspects and spaces in the industry in different states. So yeah, definitely worth a follow. I'm gonna try and get myself a copy of Legalization Nation from OK Comics, as Leeds is not too far from little old Durham. I'm not gonna drive there. That would be a good excuse to go see some friends in York. Maybe I will. Maybe I will. Who knows? Anyway, Fox, I am not going to keep you much longer. Just wanted to remind you we are continuing on with the soft launch of Legacy Culture. I've got a couple more articles that will be coming out over the next week or so. We've got an article about the recent flight that was stopped going to Amsterdam with 5 UK cannabis prescription cannabis patients having their product seized and thrown into the storage, the undercabin, and then just carelessly thrown onto the carousel with other luggage. So we'll be doing a bit of a deep dive into that and see what's happened there. We're going to be doing some more stuff around other legacy cultures as well, involving sort of outdoor spaces, camping, van life, etc. So yeah, please do check out legacyculture.co.uk. All right. If you enjoyed this, please do give us a like, a share, a subscribe, a rating, a heart, a thumbs up, or whatever it is you do, wherever it is that you enjoy this podcast on. It is greatly appreciated. Please do check us out on all social media at the Simpa Life. And yeah. Patreon, got a Patreon. Check us out on Patreon. As I discussed, I am unmonetizable thanks to the language, the guests, and the content of these conversations. So if you do want to contribute and help me keep the many lights on this little project of mine, please do check us out on patreon.com/the Simpa Life. Yeah, check out simpalife.com for my back issues of Weed World. I think new issue is being published soon, so my back issue will be going on in the next couple of weeks. You'll also find a back catalogue of various work that I've done. And yeah, I know it's a bit quiet over there at the minute because we're working on legacy culture, but there will be more content on there in the future. All right, be good to each other. Enjoy what's left of this summer. Wait, no, I'm joking. I'm joking. It can't rain forever, right? Right? I hope not. I really fucking hope not. All right, I'm gonna jump out of here. Take it easy, folks. We'll be back next week with, I don't know, somebody. It'd be awesome. You'll love it. I'll love it. All right, take it easy. Peace and love. Yo, how's it going, folks? Welcome to episode 15. Messed that up. I'm gonna try that one again. My hand didn't quite work there fast enough.